One of the quickest, easiest flatbreads to make is roti. Roti is an Indian flatbread made with just 3 ingredients: whole wheat flour, water, and salt. Whenever we make coconut curry at my house, I love to make sourdough roti to go alongside it. So here's how to make a sourdough version of this classic flatbread. Start by putting a small to medium-sized mixing bowl on a digital scale and add 150 grams of water. After the water, get out 50 grams of sourdough starter or sourdough discard. Since I usually don't have sourdough discard at home, I fed my starter the day before, and now I'm just treating it like discard. It's fallen back down again, and I'm going to use it in this recipe. So add 50 grams of starter or discard to your bowl. Regular roti doesn't call for any starter or yeast or anything like that, but since sourdough starter is just half flour and half water, it will work out perfect as an addition to this bread. Next, add 5 grams of kosher salt or sea salt, and then stir the starter, salt, and water together with a fork or a whisk until it basically becomes a milky liquid. Just keep stirring until the chunks of starter dissolve. Next, add 225 grams of 100% whole wheat flour. If you can find it, use atta flour, which is what they use in India, but I can never find that, so I just use standard whole wheat flour from my American supermarket, and they make great flatbreads too. Now stir the ingredients together for about a minute with a fork or a wooden spoon. After a minute of stirring, your dough should come together and be nice and clumpy like this. Turn the dough out onto an unfloured surface on your counter and knead it for about 5 minutes by hand. During the first minute or two of kneading, I'm usually using the clump of dough and pressing it into the other little tiny bits of dough that are on the counter, sticking the dough together into one solid mass. I'm basically using the ball of dough to pick up the other pieces of dough. Then once the dough holds together, I just knead it for a couple more minutes until I've got a smooth ball of dough that looks something like this. At this point, form the dough into a smooth ball with your hands and place it seam side down onto the counter and cover it up with the mixing bowl and let it rest for 5 minutes. After the 5-minute rest, it's time to divide the dough. Flatten the dough a little bit with your hands so it's easier to divide, and then with a chef's knife or a bench scraper, cut the dough into 6 equal pieces. If you want to weigh out these pieces so that they're as even as possible, they should weigh roughly 71 grams each, but I just like to divide them by hand. Now shape each piece of dough into a round ball by grabbing an edge of the dough and stretching it up and folding it under your thumb. Go around the ball of dough a bunch of times until all the edges are under your thumb, press to seal, and then flip the dough ball over so the seam side is facing down. Then using your hand like a claw, roll the dough around into a tight ball. Repeat this shaping process with each piece of dough until you're left with 6 round, smooth, whole wheat dough balls. Now let the dough balls rest for about 5 minutes while you preheat the pan. Speaking of which, get a 10-inch or 12-inch cast iron pan and preheat it on medium to medium-low heat. I'm doing more of a medium-low, a 2 to 3 out of 10. Now it's time to roll out each dough ball into a round and flat shape. Press down the dough with your fingertips a little bit so it's easier to roll, and then using a rolling pin, roll it back and forth till it's about 1/4 of an inch thick, then give it a quarter turn, and roll it again until it's round and about 1/8 of an inch in thickness. I clearly don't care too much about getting it perfectly round, but you can be as picky as you want to be. I do think 1/8 of an inch in thickness is the perfect thickness here, so I basically roll these out the same way I do for my sourdough naan recipe, but I go for more of a rounded shape instead of an oval shape. I think it's easiest to roll out all the rotis at once before cooking them all one by one, so put a little whole wheat flour on one side of the roti and then pop it down against the counter. That flour will keep the dough from gluing itself to the counter while you're rolling the rest of the flatbreads. Once all rotis are rolled out, your pan should be sufficiently preheated and you're ready to cook. Gently lay a piece of dough down onto the hot pan. You don't need any oil in the pan. It should just be the heat from the pan cooking the dough and not any oil. Start by cooking the first side of the flatbread on medium-low heat for about 2 minutes. During those 2 minutes, the flatbread should start to puff up and bubble a little bit. And the cool thing about this is that the puffing doesn't come from any leavening agent. The heat is just creating steam inside of the dough, and the steam is puffing up the roti. It's truly a quick flatbread that doesn't require any yeast. The sourdough starter, again, is just for fun. After 2 minutes of cooking, flip the roti over and cook it for another 1 to 1.5 minutes on the other side. You should see some beautiful char marks on the reverse side, and after you flip the dough, it might even start puffing up again if everything goes well. After 1 minute to 1.5 minutes of cooking on the other side, flip it over to check its level of doneness. And if you want a few more brown spots on the other side, flip it back over and allow it to keep cooking for another minute or so. It's such a thin flatbread that it'll definitely be done cooking at this point, but if you want more char marks and brown spots, feel free to keep cooking it as long as you want. Move the first roti to a wire rack to rest while you finish cooking the rest of the flatbreads. And if you're only used to baking sourdough bread in an oven, cooking a flatbread like this on a hot stovetop is a great way to switch things up. It's definitely a different process and a new skill to learn, and making a quick flatbread like roti is a great way to learn this new skill. After the rotis are all done cooking, put them on a cutting board and melt 1 tablespoon of butter in the microwave and brush the melted butter onto the tops of the flatbreads with a pastry brush. Now your whole grain sourdough roti is ready to serve, as it's best served when it's still a little bit warm from the pan. Now I don't have any right now, but these flatbreads are best enjoyed with some kind of curry. I like to make a red lentil coconut curry. I'm going to include a link below to a recipe out there that I really like to make. You can make any kind of curry and serve these alongside of it, and you're going to love it. This is one of the best ways, I think, to eat whole grain, whole wheat bread. These flatbreads are nutty and wholesome and delicious without feeling overly heavy and dense because they're so thin and light. So rip these up, roll them up, enjoy them alongside some rice and some kind of curry, and you're going to have yourself a great meal. I hope you enjoy this recipe, and I'll see you in the next video.